Ardra Nakshatra, cognitive subconscious patterns, audio, visual, and kinesthetic. Some people analyze, deconstruct, and question everything they encounter, while others viscerally experience life through emotions, sensations, and instinctive reactions. Ardra Nakshatra, known for its intensity, depth, and transformative mindset, processes the world in a way that is raw, disruptive, and deeply analytical. They do not simply accept information, they break it down, explore it, and reconstruct it. If we examine their cognitive processing through NLP styles, audio, visual, and kinesthetic, we see how they absorb, interpret, and interact with their environment. If their mind is visually dominant, they don't just observe, they scan for deeper truths, contradictions, and hidden meanings. If Rahu is in the first house in Ardra, they process reality through intense visual observation, constantly questioning appearances and uncovering what is beneath the surface. They may have an eye for details that others overlook, often noticing patterns, inconsistencies, or symbolic meanings in imagery. However, if Rahu is in the seventh house, their visual focus shifts outward, making them hyper-aware of others' actions, facial expressions, and social dynamics, sometimes leading to paranoia or overanalysis in relationships. If Mercury is in the third house in Ardra, their auditory processing is sharp, analytical, and highly responsive. They absorb, decode, and manipulate words and sound with precision, excelling in debates, critical discussions, and strategic communication. They are often quick-witted, sarcastic, and mentally restless, thriving in environments where language, numbers, and technical precision matter. If Mercury is in the ninth house, their auditory learning expands into abstract thinking, philosophical debates, and unconventional knowledge seeking, making them absorbers of wisdom from diverse sources rather than just structured learning. If Mars is in the sixth house in Ardra, their kinesthetic processing is driven by intensity and transformation. They do not simply experience emotions, they physically embody them, reacting with force, resilience, or extreme detachment. They learn best through struggle, discipline, and real-world challenges, using action and confrontation as tools for intellectual and emotional refinement. However, if Mars is in the 12th house, their kinesthetic awareness becomes more subconscious, leading them to process reality through hidden fears, dreams, and suppressed emotions, sometimes making them feel physically detached or disconnected from their surroundings. Ardra's intellectual depth and ability to dismantle illusions make them relentless seekers of truth. Whether they analyze through sight, sound, or physical interaction, they process experiences with intensity, emotional complexity, and a deep need for transformation. Their greatest strength lies in their ability to break apart outdated systems and ideas, ensuring that what remains is raw, real, and meaningful. Ardra Nakshatra, motivation direction, towards versus away from. Some people move toward challenges, transformation, and growth, while others are driven by the need to escape discomfort, instability, or emotional turmoil. Ardra Nakshatra, known for its intense, deconstructive, and deeply analytical nature, is not motivated by superficial rewards. It seeks truth, emotional depth, and the destruction of illusions. However, whether they are motivated by pursuing something, towards, or by avoiding something, away from, depends on planetary placements. Rahu and Mars in the first and seventh houses push them towards seeking, while Mercury and Saturn in the fourth and 10th houses may create motivation driven by avoidance or responsibility. If Rahu is in the first house in Ardra, their motivation is purely towards oriented. They are constantly seeking intellectual, emotional, and personal transformation. They are driven by unconventional experiences, knowledge, and challenges, often placing themselves in intense or unpredictable situations just to see what they can learn from them. Their insatiable curiosity and need to uncover deeper truths make them thrive in research, philosophy, and investigative pursuits. However, if Rahu is in the seventh house, their motivation shifts towards external relationships, making them chase unusual or karmic partnerships, social influence, or connections that help them unravel life's mysteries. If Mars is in the third house in Ardra, they are activity-driven, constantly seeking new challenges, intellectual battles, and adrenaline-fueled learning experiences. They pursue difficult paths just to test their own limits, thriving in competitive environments where they must prove their intelligence, resilience, or ability to overcome obstacles. However, if Mars is in the seventh house, their towards motivation focuses more on partnerships, using relationships as catalysts for transformation and intense personal growth. If Mercury is in the fourth house in Ardra, their motivation tends to be away from oriented, meaning they are seeking to escape emotional instability, a restrictive home life, or deep-seated fears of emotional vulnerability. They may feel the need to distance themselves from their roots, constantly moving to avoid feeling trapped. Their curiosity is driven by the need to replace emotional heaviness with intellectual stimulation, which may make them avoid deep emotional connections in favor of logic and analysis. However, if Mercury is in the 10th house, their motivation shifts to towards, as they actively seek professional recognition, knowledge, and influence in public settings. If Saturn is in the fourth house in Ardra, their motivation is deeply away from driven, as they work hard to avoid emotional instability, familial burdens, or unresolved karmic patterns. They often develop a detached, analytical approach to emotions as a way of protecting themselves. However, if Saturn is in the 10th house, they shift towards a goal-oriented motivation, seeking authority, recognition, and mastery in their professional life. They work tirelessly to build something lasting, ensuring that their struggles lead to tangible success rather than emotional suffering. Ardra Nakshatra's intellectual sharpness and emotional depth make it naturally inclined towards seeking transformation and deep knowledge. However, planetary placements determine whether they chase new experiences to expand their understanding or avoid past emotional burdens by intellectualizing life. Their challenge is to balance their hunger for intensity with the ability to find peace, ensuring that their quest for knowledge leads to empowerment rather than endless emotional upheaval. Ardra Nakshatra, attention direction, self or others. Some people are deeply introspective, focusing on their own thoughts, emotions, and intellectual pursuits, while others are highly attuned to their surroundings, constantly observing and responding to social dynamics. Ardra Nakshatra, known for its analytical mind, emotional depth, and transformative energy, naturally oscillates between deep self-reflection and external observation. However, whether their attention is directed toward themselves or others depends on planetary placements. Moon and Rahu in the first and seventh houses influence self or others-oriented attention, while Mercury and Saturn in the fourth and 10th houses shape whether they are internally or externally driven. If Moon is in the first house in Ardra, their attention is deeply self-focused. They spend a great deal of time analyzing their emotions, thoughts, and internal experiences, often becoming lost in deep intellectual contemplation. Their mind constantly processes information, searching for meaning within their own perceptions rather than relying on external validation. However, if Moon is in the seventh house, their attention shifts outward, making them highly engaged with relationships and social interactions. They become deeply sensitive to the emotions and needs of others, sometimes prioritizing external validation over their own inner voice. If Rahu is in the first house in Ardra, their attention is hyper-focused on themselves, particularly in the areas of self-transformation, intellectual exploration, and personal reinvention. They are constantly searching for their own unique identity, experimenting with different perspectives, and redefining their path in life. However, if Rahu moves to the seventh house, their focus becomes externally driven, making them fascinated by others, drawn to unconventional relationships, and obsessed with social dynamics. They may seek validation through their connections, constantly adjusting their identity based on how they are perceived. If Mercury is in the fourth house in Ardra, their attention remains internally focused, as they are deeply engaged in their thoughts, memories, and personal intellectual growth. They prefer deep analysis, self-study, and contemplation, often needing solitude to process their ideas. However, if Mercury is in the 10th house, their attention shifts outward, making them highly attuned to communication, networking, and career-driven interactions. They thrive in environments where they can exchange ideas, influence others, and build a strong intellectual or professional presence in the world. If Saturn is in the fourth house in Ardra, their attention is internally structured, meaning they focus on self-discipline, emotional resilience, and personal mastery. They do not easily let external opinions alter their sense of self, instead relying on long-term reflection and careful planning. However, if Saturn is in the 10th house, their validation becomes externally conditioned. They measure their self-worth based on their ability to meet career expectations, fulfill societal responsibilities, and establish a lasting legacy. They become highly aware of how they are perceived in professional and public spaces. Ardra Nakshatra's intellectual intensity and need for constant exploration ensure that they engage with both self-reflection and external observation. The challenge is learning when to focus inward for deeper self-awareness and when to direct their attention outward to build meaningful connections. Mastering this balance allows them to thrive as both independent thinkers and influential communicators. Ardra Nakshatra, understanding chunk size, big or little. Some people process information by grasping overarching themes, seeing patterns, and understanding concepts at a broad level, while others prefer to break things down into small, detailed steps, ensuring that every element is precise and analyzed thoroughly. Ardra Nakshatra, known for its intellectual sharpness, deep analysis, and ability to deconstruct ideas, naturally leans toward breaking things apart and analyzing the finer details before assembling them into a complete understanding. However, whether they are big picture, macro thinkers, or detail-oriented, micro analysts depends on planetary placements. Jupiter and Mercury in the first, fifth, and ninth houses influence whether they focus on expansive knowledge or meticulous details. If Jupiter is in the first house in Ardra, their thinking is broad and general, meaning they focus on higher knowledge, philosophical perspectives, and expansive intellectual pursuits, rather than minute details. They are driven by big picture understanding, seeing connections between ideas, and synthesizing information across various disciplines. However, they may overlook important nuances or small technicalities in their eagerness to grasp larger themes. If Jupiter moves to the ninth house, this macro thinking expands into spiritual, academic, or research-based fields, making them deeply interested in universal truths and intellectual exploration rather than step-by-step learning. If Mercury is in the fifth house in Ardra, their thinking is highly specific, detail-focused, and analytical. They break down complex ideas into structured steps, excelling in technical skills, structured writing, research, and problem-solving. Unlike Jupiter, which generalizes, Mercury in this position thrives on precision, logical progression, and step-by-step refinement, making them proficient in fields requiring sharp intellect, investigative thinking, and deep analysis. However, if Mercury moves to the ninth house, their thinking expands into more abstract conceptual exploration, allowing them to see both patterns and details, but preferring to operate at a broader level when synthesizing knowledge. If Ketu is in the first house in Ardra, their understanding is paradoxically broad yet deeply instinctual. They do not process knowledge in a structured way, but instead grasp insights intuitively, seeing connections without consciously breaking them down. They may struggle to explain their knowledge in logical terms as they absorb abstract patterns rather than follow linear reasoning. However, if Ketu is in the fifth house, their thinking becomes highly detail-oriented but nonlinear, meaning they decode hidden details, subconscious patterns, and symbolic meanings that others overlook. They excel in esoteric knowledge, deep research, and unconventional problem-solving, but may struggle with traditional learning structures that require a structured approach. Ardra Nakshatra's intellectual sharpness and deep analytical ability make it adaptable to both macro and micro thinking, depending on planetary influences. When planetary placements emphasize big picture awareness, they excel in abstract thought, visionary insights, and understanding broad intellectual landscapes. But when detail-oriented influences dominate, they become masters of precision, able to dissect and refine information down to its most intricate components. Their challenge is to balance their deep analytical nature with the ability to step back and see the whole picture, ensuring that their intellectual pursuits lead to meaningful transformation rather than endless dissection. Ardra Nakshatra, frame of reference, internal or external. Some people trust their own reasoning, relying on personal experiences and internal logic to guide their decisions, while others seek external validation, measuring their success based on how they are perceived by others. Ardra Nakshatra, known for its intellectual sharpness, questioning nature, and transformative approach to knowledge, naturally leans toward internal processing, where they deconstruct information and seek truth independently. However, whether they are internally referenced, self-driven, or externally referenced, seeking validation from others depends on planetary placements. Jupiter, Moon, Mercury, and Saturn in the 4th and 10th houses shape whether they derive confidence and decision-making from within or rely on external cues. If Jupiter is in the 4th house in Ardra, their frame of reference is deeply internal, meaning they trust their own wisdom, life experiences, and intellectual exploration to guide them. They do not easily conform to societal expectations because they are driven by their own philosophical insights and analytical thinking. They value self-learning, intuition, and independent study, rarely feeling the need to seek external approval. However, if Jupiter is in the 10th house, their reference frame shifts externally. Success becomes defined by career status, public recognition, and how well they apply their knowledge to influence society. They may still be deeply philosophical, but they begin evaluating their growth based on external acknowledgement rather than internal understanding. If the Moon is in the 4th house in Ardra, their validation is strongly internal and emotionally introspective. They rely on their own emotional intelligence, memories, and inner experiences to make decisions. They do not easily seek approval from others as long as their internal world feels balanced. However, if the Moon moves to the 10th house, their frame of reference becomes externally conditioned. They begin to seek validation through public acknowledgement, professional reputation, and social standing. Their emotions become tied to how they are perceived by others, making them more reactive to external praise or criticism. If Mercury is in the 4th house in Ardra, they process information internally first, preferring to analyze situations on their own before expressing their thoughts. They value intellectual independence, deep research, and self-guided learning, making them less inclined to change their opinions based on external input. However, if Mercury is in the 10th house, their reference frame shifts outward, meaning they become highly attuned to public debates, career-based discussions, and how their intelligence is perceived by their peers or superiors. Their thought process is shaped by external conversations, professional expectations, and public interactions. If Saturn is in the 4th house in Ardra, their sense of self is internally structured, meaning they build their confidence through self-discipline, personal responsibility, and deep introspection. They are highly independent and do not easily let external opinions alter their decisions. However, if Saturn is in the 10th house, their validation becomes externally conditioned. They measure their self-worth based on their career, societal achievements, and ability to meet professional expectations. They may feel pressured to conform to external standards, prioritizing their public role over personal satisfaction. Ardra Nakshatra's intellectual curiosity and ability to break down illusions make it naturally skeptical of external influences, preferring to seek truth independently. However, planetary placements determine whether they trust their own understanding or seek external confirmation. Their challenge is to balance their deep need for internal exploration with the wisdom to recognize when external feedback can enhance their growth, ensuring they neither isolate themselves in personal analysis nor become overly dependent on societal validation. Ardra Nakshatra, action preference, proactive or reactive. Some people take charge, initiating action and seeking challenges head-on, while others observe, analyze, and react strategically based on circumstances. Ardra Nakshatra, known for its intellectual depth, emotional intensity, and ability to deconstruct and rebuild, naturally leans toward a mix of analysis and action, ensuring they respond in the most impactful way. However, whether they are proactive, self-initiating, or reactive, responding to external triggers. depends on planetary placements. Mars, Mercury, and Rahu in the 3rd, 5th, and 10th houses influence whether they take immediate action or adjust based on external stimuli. If Mars is in the 3rd house in Ardra, their action preference is highly proactive. They are driven, aggressive in pursuit of knowledge, and constantly challenging themselves to push past intellectual and physical limitations. They initiate debates, chase intellectual mastery, and create movement in their environment, often taking risks without waiting for the perfect moment. However, if Mars is in the 10th house, their proactivity becomes career-focused, making them ambitious leaders who take control of their professional path rather than waiting for opportunities to come to them. If Mercury is in the 5th house in Ardra, their approach to action is more reactive and mentally adaptive. They prefer to observe, analyze, and process information before making a move, ensuring that their responses are precise and well-informed. Unlike Mars, which acts on instinct, Mercury in this position thrives on flexibility and intellectual problem-solving, making them great at quick adaptations, strategic planning, and responding to new information in creative ways. However, if Mercury is in the 10th house, their reactivity becomes strategic in professional and public settings. They prefer to watch industry trends, respond to external opportunities, and carefully craft their career moves based on data and logic rather than pure ambition. If Rahu is in the 3rd house in Ardra, their action preference becomes unpredictable, erratic, and hyper-proactive in communication, networking, and risk-taking. They are always experimenting with new ideas, pushing boundaries, and challenging conventions, making them restless and highly innovative. However, if Rahu moves to the 10th house, their action preference shifts toward reactivity in career and public life. They often respond to external pressures, societal trends, and unexpected career shifts, making bold moves in reaction to circumstances rather than out of pure internal ambition. Ardra Nakshatra's deep thinking and need for transformation ensure that their actions are rarely impulsive but always deliberate. Whether they initiate or respond, their approach is strategic, ensuring maximum impact. Their greatest strength lies in balancing their ability to take bold action with their capacity to analyze situations carefully, ensuring that they create change with both force and precision. Ardra Nakshatra, operational style, options versus procedures. Some people thrive on flexibility, constantly exploring multiple approaches to solving a problem, while others prefer structured, step-by-step methods that ensure precision and efficiency. Ardra Nakshatra, known for its intellectual sharpness, adaptability, and ability to break down and reconstruct ideas, naturally leans toward options-based thinking, preferring to explore various solutions rather than following rigid systems. However, whether they operate with an options-driven mindset, preferring flexibility, or a procedures-driven mindset, favoring structure and discipline, depends on planetary placements. Rahu and Mars in the 3rd and 6th houses encourage adaptability, while Mercury and Saturn in the 6th and 10th houses promote structured execution. If Rahu is in the 3rd house in Ardra, their operational style is highly options-based. They are restless, experimental, and thrive in dynamic environments where they can pivot and explore unconventional paths. They excel in research, problem-solving, and high-risk ventures where adaptability is key, but they may struggle with consistency, frequently abandoning projects in search of the next intellectual challenge. If Rahu is in the 6th house, they still prefer options, but with a more practical, problem-solving mindset. They constantly test different ways to complete tasks, learning through trial and error rather than strict adherence to rules. If Mars is in the 3rd house in Ardra, they operate in high-energy, instinct-driven mode, excelling in competitive and mentally stimulating fields where quick decision-making is required. Their approach is assertive, action-oriented, and often aggressive, preferring immediate execution over lengthy planning. However, this can sometimes lead to hasty decision-making or impatience with structured learning. If Mars is in the 6th house, their operational style becomes more disciplined and strategic, integrating structured routines with tactical problem-solving, ensuring that their natural curiosity doesn't lead to scattered efforts. If Mercury is in the sixth house in Ardra, their operational style leans heavily toward procedures. They thrive in structured work environments that require deep analysis, organization, and methodical execution. They excel at breaking down complex problems into manageable steps, ensuring clarity and refinement in execution. Unlike Rahu, which jumps between ideas, Mercury in this position seeks logical, efficient workflows, making them highly proficient in detail-oriented and data-driven professions. If Saturn is in the 10th house in Ardra, their work style is procedural, long-term focused, and highly disciplined. They prefer structured career paths, rule-based environments, and methodical progression, excelling in corporate, government, or leadership roles that require patience and precision. They dislike unpredictability and chaotic workflows, ensuring that every step is planned, structured, and refined. While this brings stability and mastery, it can sometimes clash with Ardra's natural inclination toward adaptability and exploration, making them feel confined or overly rigid in traditional structures. Ardra Nakshatra's innate ability to analyze, deconstruct, and innovate makes it naturally inclined toward options-driven thinking, allowing them to approach challenges from multiple angles rather than committing to a single path. However, planetary placements determine whether they embrace flexibility or commit to structured execution. The key for Ardra natives is to balance their need for exploration with enough structure to ensure their intellectual pursuits lead to real-world results, allowing them to thrive both in spontaneous creativity and methodical mastery. Ardra Nakshatra views general or specific. Some people focus on broad themes, seeing patterns and making intuitive connections across different areas, while others analyze details meticulously, breaking down every element to its core before forming conclusions. Ardra Nakshatra, known for its sharp intellect, analytical depth, and transformative thinking, naturally leans toward dismantling and reconstructing ideas, often examining both the macro and micro perspectives simultaneously. However, whether they process information in big picture, general, or detail-oriented, specific chunks depends on planetary placements. Jupiter and Mercury in the 1st, 5th, and 9th houses influence whether they focus on broad themes or precise details. If Jupiter is in the 1st house in Ardra, their thinking is broad and general, meaning they prefer to connect ideas across disciplines, synthesize information, and understand overarching patterns rather than getting lost in specifics. They thrive in abstract thinking, philosophy, and deep exploration of universal truths, often taking a big picture approach to learning and decision-making. However, they may overlook fine details or practical steps necessary for execution, focusing too much on grand ideas without grounding them in reality. If Jupiter moves to the 9th house, this big picture thinking expands even further, drawing them toward higher learning, research, and deep intellectual exploration, often making them more focused on theoretical knowledge rather than practical applications. If Mercury is in the 5th house in Ardra, their thinking is highly specific, detail-focused, and analytical. They excel in breaking down complex ideas, structuring arguments, and refining knowledge into precise, logical components. Unlike Jupiter, which generalizes, Mercury in this placement thrives on technical mastery, structured learning, and systematic execution, making them proficient in fields requiring sharp intellect, problem-solving, and meticulous organization. However, if Mercury moves to the 9th house, their thinking expands into broader, abstract exploration, allowing them to balance their attention between fine details and overarching ideas. If Ketu is in the 1st house in Ardra, their understanding is paradoxically broad yet deeply instinctual. They see patterns without needing structured reasoning, often absorbing insights intuitively rather than logically. They may struggle to articulate how they arrive at conclusions because their mind jumps between abstract ideas without following a linear path. However, if Ketu is in the 5th house, their thinking becomes highly detail-oriented but nonlinear, meaning they notice hidden details, symbolic meanings, and subconscious patterns that others overlook. They excel in esoteric knowledge, deep analysis, and decoding complex systems, but may struggle with traditional academic structures that require sequential learning. Ardra Nakshatra's deep analytical ability and transformative thinking make it adaptable to both macro and micro perspectives, depending on planetary influences. When planetary placements emphasize big picture awareness, they excel in abstract thought, philosophical insights, and broad intellectual exploration. But when detail-oriented influences dominate, they become masters of precision, capable of deconstructing and refining information down to its most intricate components. Their challenge is to balance their intense analytical nature with the ability to step back and see the whole picture, ensuring that their knowledge leads to meaningful transformation rather than endless dissection. Ardra Nakshatra, work preferences, together, proximity, or solo. Some people flourish in collaborative environments, enjoying constant intellectual exchange and teamwork. Others prefer to work independently but stay close to others for inspiration and occasional discussion, while some work best in complete solitude, where they can focus without distraction. Ardra Nakshatra, known for its restless curiosity, sharp intellect, and need for deep analysis, prefers work that allows mental stimulation, exploration, and transformation, rather than routine or predictability. However, whether they function best in team settings, together, near others but independently, proximity, or in complete solitude, solo, depends on planetary placements. Venus, Mercury, and Ketu in the 3rd, 6th, and 10th houses influence whether they thrive in collaboration, need personal space within a team, or prefer to work alone. If Venus is in the 3rd house in Ardra, they prefer working together, excelling in social, communicative, and idea-driven environments. They thrive in media, networking, public relations, research teams, and group brainstorming sessions, where they can engage in intellectual discussions and exchange perspectives. They enjoy working with dynamic individuals who challenge their thinking and bring fresh insights, but they may struggle in overly structured or rigid team settings. If Venus is in the 10th house, they still prefer team-based environments, but in leadership roles, where they can direct discussions, bring innovation to projects, and introduce unconventional yet effective ideas. If Mercury is in the 6th house in Ardra, they work best in proximity-based settings, where they can engage in discussions but still have autonomy over their tasks. They enjoy professions involving analysis, strategy, investigative research, and structured problem solving, where they can work alone while still having access to collaboration when needed. They are highly adaptable, preferring roles that allow them to switch between solo and group work without rigid expectations. If Mercury moves to the 10th house, their proximity-based preference extends to high-level discussions and intellectual leadership, where they engage in big-picture strategy while maintaining their independence in execution. If Ketu is in the 6th house in Ardra, they work best solo, excelling in self-driven professions that require deep concentration, analytical thinking, and unconventional approaches. They dislike routine, repetitive work, and overly structured corporate environments, preferring roles that involve deep research, philosophy, or uncovering hidden truths. If Ketu is in the 10th house, their solo work preference becomes even more pronounced, leading them to careers in consulting, freelancing, technology, or esoteric fields, where they do not have to conform to traditional workplace expectations. Ardra Nakshatra's intellectual depth and desire for constant mental engagement allow them to excel in both team-based and independent roles, but planetary placements determine whether they thrive in collaborative efforts, require space while staying connected, or prefer complete autonomy. Their challenge is to balance their love for exploration and problem solving with a stable work environment that allows them to see their ideas through to completion. Ardra Nakshatra, experience, association versus dissociation. Some people fully immerse themselves in experiences, feeling emotions deeply and connecting to events with intensity, while others detach, analyze, and observe from a distance, preferring to maintain objectivity rather than emotional involvement. Ardra Nakshatra, known for its intellectual depth, transformative tendencies, and ability to break down and reconstruct ideas naturally leans toward dissociation, often analyzing experiences rather than fully feeling them. However, whether they associate, fully engage, or dissociate, observe from a distance, depends on planetary placements. Mercury and Jupiter in the 4th, 5th, and 10th houses influence whether they immerse themselves in experiences or detach for analysis. If Mercury is in the 4th house in Ardra, their experience is highly associated, meaning they mentally and emotionally engage in personal and intellectual pursuits. They fully absorb information through conversations, debates, and learning, thriving in environments where they can engage in deep discussions and emotional introspection. However, if Mercury is in the 10th house, their experience shifts toward dissociation. They become more strategic, career-focused, and detached from personal emotions, prioritizing logic and external success over deep emotional connections. This may clash with Ardra's natural emotional intensity, making them feel mentally engaged but emotionally disconnected from their surroundings. If Jupiter is in the 5th house in Ardra, their experience remains highly associated, especially in areas of learning, creativity, and relationships. They immerse themselves in knowledge, teaching, and romantic experiences, fully feeling and engaging with their emotions. They find fulfillment in storytelling, education, and philosophical discussions, deeply attaching to the lessons they learn. However, if Jupiter moves to the 10th house, their approach to experience becomes more dissociated. They focus on long-term goals, career growth, and professional influence rather than emotional engagement. They may view relationships and personal experiences as learning opportunities rather than deeply felt moments, which can make them appear distant or overly analytical. If Ketu is in the 4th house in Ardra, their experience of life is strongly dissociated, particularly in emotional and personal matters. They often feel detached from their roots, family, and emotional security, struggling to form deep emotional attachments. Ardra's desire for intellectual and emotional exploration clashes with Ketu's detached, karmic energy, making them feel as though they are constantly searching for something but never truly grounded. If Ketu moves to the 5th house, this dissociation extends to creativity, romance, and self-expression, where they may detach from pleasure, emotional depth, or traditional ways of experiencing joy, processing experiences in a more philosophical or detached manner. Ardra Nakshatra's natural inclination is to analyze, question, and deconstruct experiences rather than passively absorb them, making placements that encourage dissociation, like Ketu or a highly career-focused Mercury or Jupiter, feel natural but sometimes isolating. The challenge for Ardra natives with dissociative planetary placements is to balance their need for intellectual objectivity with the ability to emotionally engage, ensuring they neither become lost in endless analysis nor overwhelmed by emotional intensity. Ardra Nakshatra. Approach. Matching versus mismatching. Some people align with existing structures, seeking familiarity and reinforcing patterns, while others question, challenge, and break away from norms, always searching for what's different or missing. Ardra Nakshatra, known for its analytical depth, curiosity, and transformative energy, naturally leans toward mismatching, always deconstructing ideas, testing systems, and questioning everything. However, whether they prefer matching, seeking alignment and continuity, or mismatching, focusing on differences and breaking patterns, depends on planetary placements. Saturn and Rahu in the 3rd and 6th houses influence whether they maintain tradition or disrupt it. If Saturn is in the 3rd house in Ardra, their approach is matching-oriented, meaning they prefer structured learning, proven systems, and logical progression. They trust traditional methods, value consistency, and are cautious about embracing change too quickly. They are methodical in their approach to communication, knowledge, and personal development, making them reliable and disciplined, but sometimes rigid in their thinking. If Saturn is in the 6th house, their matching tendency becomes even stronger in work and discipline. They follow structured routines, adhere to established protocols, and ensure consistency in their execution. While this brings stability, It may clash with Ardra's natural curiosity and need for transformation, making them feel restricted by too much structure. If Rahu is in the third house in Ardra, their approach becomes highly mismatching. They challenge intellectual norms, reject conventional learning paths, and seek unconventional ways to expand their knowledge. Unlike Saturn, which follows rules, Rahu disrupts them, making these individuals highly inventive, rebellious, and constantly questioning. While this makes them brilliant at innovation and critical thinking, it can also lead to mental restlessness and difficulty in committing to a single focus. If Rahu moves to the sixth house, mismatching becomes even more pronounced in work, competition, and problem solving. They resist traditional job structures, experiment with alternative ways of working, and constantly challenge authority. This can bring success in unconventional careers, but also create instability if they struggle to commit to a clear direction. Ardra Nakshatra's intellectual curiosity and need for discovery make it naturally lean toward mismatching, seeking diversity, new experiences, and alternative viewpoints. However, planetary placements determine whether they embrace established structures or constantly seek change. The key for Ardra natives is to balance their desire for fresh insights with the wisdom to recognize when structure and stability are necessary, ensuring that their exploration leads to mastery rather than endless deconstruction. Ardra Nakshatra, time experience, in time versus through time. Some people are fully immersed in the present, responding to life as it unfolds, while others perceive time as a structured sequence, constantly reflecting on past lessons and anticipating future outcomes. Ardra Nakshatra, known for its intellectual sharpness, emotional intensity, and transformative nature, naturally leans toward a dynamic relationship with time, constantly analyzing and deconstructing experiences. However, whether they are in time, living in the moment, or through time, tracking life as a structured timeline, depends on planetary placements. Saturn and Jupiter in the first, seventh house axis influence in-time perception, while their placements in the fourth, 10th axis shape a through-time approach. If Saturn is in the first house in Ardra, their time experience is in time, slow, and deeply rooted in present awareness. They process experiences carefully, ensuring each moment is analyzed before moving forward, which can sometimes clash with Ardra's natural restlessness, creating tension between rapid change and structured thought. However, if Saturn is in the seventh house, their in-time focus shifts to relationships, making them fully engaged in their interactions with others, sometimes struggling to detach and see the long-term impact of their connections. If Jupiter is in the fourth house in Ardra, their time experience becomes through time, focused on long-term emotional growth and learning from past experiences. They process life with a broad awareness of how past, present, and future are interconnected, making them deep thinkers who analyze how previous choices shape their current reality. However, if Jupiter moves to the 10th house, their through-time perception shifts toward career and public impact, making them highly strategic in their professional growth, ensuring each step contributes to a bigger long-term vision. If Rahu is in the first house in Ardra, their time experience is hyper in time, fully absorbed in the present, driven by curiosity and the pursuit of new experiences. They thrive on intellectual and emotional stimulation, constantly seeking transformation and new insights. However, this can lead to impulsivity, as they often prioritize immediate learning over long-term consequences. If Rahu moves to the seventh house, their focus becomes externally driven, making them highly aware of social validation, unpredictable relationship dynamics, and immediate gratification in partnerships rather than thinking long-term. If Ketu is in the fourth house in Ardra, their through-time awareness is detached, feeling disconnected from the present and overly influenced by past karmic patterns. They may feel as though they are reliving cycles rather than actively shaping their own destiny, often processing emotions and experiences at a subconscious level rather than engaging in them directly. If Ketu moves to the 10th house, their through-time perception applies to career and public influence, where they may achieve success, but remain emotionally disconnected from ambition, seeing their professional journey as a karmic duty rather than a personal mission. Ardra Nakshatra's intellectual curiosity and transformative nature make it naturally fluid in its relationship with time, capable of both living in the moment and tracking long-term consequences. However, planetary influences determine whether they stay immersed in the present or maintain a structured past, present, future awareness. Balancing their analytical depth with the ability to embrace time as it unfolds ensures they harness their wisdom without becoming lost in overanalysis or impulsive change. Ardra Nakshatra, primary interest motivation, people, activities, places, or things. Some people find motivation in relationships and social connections, while others are driven by action, exploration, or material success. Ardra Nakshatra, known for its intellectual sharpness, curiosity, and transformative nature, naturally seeks intensity, learning, and deconstruction of the world around them. However, whether they are primarily motivated by people, activities, places, or things depends on planetary placements. Jupiter and the Moon influence social motivation, people. Mars drives action-oriented focus, activities. Mercury directs curiosity toward places, and Saturn and Rahu determine material or structural motivations, things. If Jupiter is in the 7th house in Ardra, their primary motivation comes from people, particularly through intellectual engagement, mentorship, and unconventional relationships. They seek wisdom, knowledge exchange, and deep conversations, often surrounding themselves with highly intelligent, philosophical, or transformative individuals. However, if the Moon is in the 1st house, their motivation from people is emotionally charged. They are drawn to intense, emotionally stimulating relationships that challenge them to grow and transform. Their sense of purpose is often linked to how deeply they can connect with others on a psychological or intellectual level. If Mars is in the 3rd house in Ardra, their primary motivation is activity. They are restless, driven by intellectual and physical challenges, and constantly seeking movement and mental stimulation. They enjoy competitive discussions, investigative work, and fields that require quick thinking and problem solving. However, if Mars moves to the 6th house, their action-based motivation becomes more structured, focused on long-term discipline, strategy, and endurance-based work, making them more methodical in their pursuits, rather than impulsively chasing the next challenge. If Mercury is in the 4th house in Ardra, their motivation is deeply tied to places, particularly in the form of constant movement, shifting environments, and intellectual stimulation through changing surroundings. They are drawn to travel, diverse cultures, and experiences that expose them to new perspectives, thriving in careers that involve relocation, exploration, or dynamic social environments. If Mercury moves to the 10th house, their motivation for places expands toward professional environments, meaning they seek career growth through different industries, networking opportunities, and global engagement. If Saturn is in the 6th house in Ardra, their primary motivation is things, particularly structure, mastery, and tangible success. They are highly disciplined, strategic, and persistent, seeking to build expertise and establish stability through their work. They are less driven by social validation and more focused on perfecting their craft and proving themselves through effort and endurance. If Rahu is in the 10th house, their material motivation becomes status-driven, fueled by ambition, unconventional success, and the desire to gain recognition. They are drawn to powerful careers, groundbreaking discoveries, and industries that allow them to disrupt the norm, constantly chasing something that cements their influence and impact. Ardra Nakshatra's analytical nature and love for exploration ensure they pursue motivation through learning, problem solving, and transformation, rather than through passive or conventional means. Whether their drive is focused on people, action, places, or material success, they approach it with intensity, curiosity, and a need to break apart illusions to uncover the deeper truth. Their challenge is to balance their restless drive for knowledge with the patience to refine and apply what they learn, ensuring their quest for truth leads to mastery rather than perpetual deconstruction.